Hey guys, welcome to episode 2 of our mixed media miniseries with Workman Arts and Artfix. What we're going to be talking about today is the concept of mantras and self-love mantras. And I'm going to give you a little bit of insight as to why I believe they're important, and how, the use of positive messages has kind of helped rewire my brain to be a little bit more optimistic than it has in previous years. So if we start with Wikipedia, Wikipedia is the first place that we're almost always going to start just because it's such an amazing resource. Yeah, I just think that Wikipedia is priceless, and they really appreciate any coffees that you may be able to contribute to them. So we're going to start on Wikipedia today, and we're going to talk about what a mantra is. So Wikipedia will tell you that a mantra in Sanskrit is a sacred utterance, a numinous sound, a syllable, word or phonemes, or group of words in Sanskrit believed by practitioners to have psychological and or spiritual powers. And so if we scroll down a little bit here to the history of it, it'll tell you that the Sanskrit word mantra is derived from the root man or man, which translates to quote unquote, to think. Wikipedia goes on to say that the earliest mantras were composed in Vedic Sanskrit in India and are at least 3,000 years old. So in terms of the planet and civilization, these are some of the oldest kind of writings that we have in existence. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think that mantras are really important. So in our very first year psychology, they kind of talked about the placebo effect, which is a beneficial effect produced by a placebo or drug treatment, and because they found it when they were doing studies, which cannot be attributed to the properties of the placebo itself. And a placebo is essentially like a sugar pill, so it's not a real thing. So in a test, they would give or nothing to a control group, something to a control group, to a group A, and then the placebo to the last group to see just to kind of measure the effects of what happens when people think they're taking something. And a lot of the time they actually got results from placebos, and so this became kind of a phenomena where they realized that the effects that were happening from the placebo, quote unquote, must therefore be due to the patient's belief in that treatment. And I thought that was like a really interesting thing, because how could our beliefs have real world impacts like that? I just thought that it was really amazing, kind of spoke to the power of the brain and the power of our belief to create real world results. So before we start, I'm just kind of wanted to share with you guys a Spotify playlist that I've been listening to recently. It's a peaceful guitar playlist, and it's just really nice to have on in the background when you're working, or when you're thinking, if you kind of want something quiet, but you don't want to sit in complete silence. This is a playlist that I've super enjoyed, and it just might be nice to have it on in the background as you're working. So I kind of wanted to talk about Sanskrit a little bit, because I felt like it was really important to note that where the mantra came from is actually an ancient practice, and it's something that has been around for thousands and thousands of years. So I feel like there's some really awesome merit to it. So I have a couple of websites here that I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about. There's lots of mantras that you can kind of work with, and you can have first-person mantras. You can have first-person mantras where it's I am this. Or you can have second-person mantras that are you are amazing, or you are this. And I think that it really is up to you to decide what type of language is most effective for you. I personally really respond to quotes, to uplifting quotes from other people. But I've also really enjoyed first-person stuff as well. So this website here, fitwoman.com, has an article for 15 morning mantras for a happier life, and they just kind of have they explain a little bit of how to use self mantras, and it talks about noticing the negative self-talk. And I think that that's a really important thing to be aware of, because I think that if we are caught in negative loops, regardless of where they come from, I think that acknowledging those things and replacing those thoughts with more positive ones could be really beneficial. And I'm not going to say that it works for everybody, because everybody is different, and there's a lot of debate back and forth as to whether or not the whole positive psychology stuff works. But for myself, it really, really did help. They're saying, replace it with a neutral phrase, or say a self-love mantra that will help rewire those neural pathways. And that's kind of what I feel happens when you just see these things in your environment. So I think that it's really important for us to have mantras around us, and have good words and good thoughts, and share those things with ourselves. So these ones are all I statements. So, 1, I love myself. I am enough. 4, I am worthy of love. I am strong. I've got this. I am not my thoughts. There's ones that are there to kind of help kind of combat negative thoughts. And so it's really up to you as to whether or not you identify with these types of mantras. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about positive psychology and a little bit about how it's different from motivational psychology. One of the quotes that I really liked from this article, which kind of speaks similarly to what we just saw in that last article about the mantras, is that, quote, positive thinking is based in large part on cognitive or thought-based ways to attain a more emotionally positive frame of mind, with the understanding that when we think more positively, we feel better, and we operate from a stronger, more functional place within ourselves. And I feel like similarly to how meditation kind of helps with stress levels, because it really allows you to control your breathing, control your heart rate, and therefore manage your response to stress a little bit better. And so I think likewise that putting positive messages in and around your environment for you to see is a good way to help yourself remember to treat yourself with love and respect, because if you don't do that, who else is going to do that? So I think that there's like a lot of really powerful messages in this article, and it talks a little bit about cognitive behavior therapy, which, you know, I've seen people debate the validity of this as well. But again, in my experience, from what I've done, for what trying to rewire my pathways have done, it's been like really beneficial for me to have like wholesome things. Like I used to be subscribed to nihilist memes. I'm not, I used to think they were really funny, and I genuinely still do relate to some of them, but I think that I've replaced my nihilist memes with wholesome memes, and the wholesome meme pages are just really wonderful to like look at, because a lot of the time there's enough negative things in the world. There's enough with the news and with like whatever social media, negative self-image and stuff like that. Like there's a lot of things in the world that are already really difficult to look at. So I think that filling your everyday space and filling the space around you with positive messages for yourself is a good practice for self-love. So, and there's further research on that as well. So cognitive behavior therapy, like you don't have to look at the articles that are in this website. You can totally do your own research, and positive psychology is just a really interesting area of study anyways. So, yeah, and a lot of the language that they use is really uplifting as well. So it's interesting. I enjoy reading stuff about positive and motivational psychology. So before we continue, what cognitive behavior psychology actually is, or the acronym CBT that you'll see kind of come up a lot. This is just a Google definition from psychcentral.com, and it says CBT is a short-term, goal-oriented psychotherapy treatment that takes a hands-on, practical approach to problem solving. Its goal is to change patterns of thinking or behavior that are behind people's difficulties, and so change the way that they feel. So a lot of that kind of is recognizing, you know, when you're having a bad time, and then to be able to rewire those negative responses that we would normally have to healthier responses or healthier, you know, thoughts, whether it's something that is like outward, and like an outward form of expression or an inward form of expression. I personally feel like the inward forms of expression are like more significant than the outward ones, because no one outside of you hears those internal dialogues. So it's important for you to be kind to yourself. Motivational psychology like has a lot of kind of overlap with positive psychology, but really at the root of it, motivational psychology is kind of looking at what types of things allow people to be motivated and driven. And so there's a lot of different theories of motivational psychology. There's a link here for positivepsychology.com that talks about theories of motivation. There's like lots of branches and a lot of different theories that exist. I'm really interested personally with intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation means you're like motivated by yourself internally. So you feel good when you do something, and that motivates you to do it more. And so the motivation that you get from extrinsic motivation is from like outside influences, not yourself. Whether it's friends, family, employers, money, whatever it is, like, and so those things can be very powerful motivators as well. But again, some people play guitar and get really good at guitar because they're musicians and they thrive off of each other's, you know, that's a good example of where it's like not money based and it's not validation based, but that feeling of being connected to other musicians could be considered an extrinsic motivation. And so motivation, you know, the reason that motivation is important is because we want, like, this allows us to achieve our goals. And one of the things in motivational psychology that they taught us was that optimism is a very important kind of component to motivation, and that people who have no optimism and have no hope are very unwell by comparison to people who have hope and have optimism. Because if you feel optimistic, you feel like there's a chance that when you do something that it will yield a good outcome. Whereas if you don't have optimism and you don't have hope, you're gonna think, who cares? Like, what's the matter? What's the difference is this gonna make? There's a lot of things that you can read about, like looking at your goals and stuff like that, but I've just found that having those mantras and having those quotes are really helpful. So on that positive psychology website, theverywellmind.com, one of the things that they talk about is meaning. And so I thought that meaning and meaning and positive messages and creating your own meaning was like something that I was really interested in. So if we look at meaning kind of a little bit more deeply, I think that it's really interesting that you can create meaning within your life. And so this is one of those sources that you can kind of pick and choose the messages that you feel are really important to perpetuate and be aware of in your day-to-day. This is another positive psychology website. And so the quote is that the pleasant life, I suggested, is wrapped up in the successful pursuit of the positive feelings, supplemented by the skills of amplifying these emotions. The good life, a next step, is a life wrapped up in success and successfully using your signature strengths to obtain abundant and authentic gratification. And then the last step, the meaningful life, has one additional feature: using your signature strengths in the service of something larger than you are. To live all three lives is to lead a full life. And I thought that that was like really interesting, because I think that we really do have the power to decide what has meaning in our life. And so I think it's important for us to fill our lives with meaning and be investing our energy and our emotions and our time into things that will have positive impacts on us and the people around us. And so a lot of these messages kind of contribute to cultivating these better connections and more meaningful connections with the world around us and the people and our community. And this is something that in recent years has like really changed my outlook and stuff, because I was somebody who before was very much so an optimistic nihilist is what I called myself, because I would look at things and be like, oh, they have no meaning, so who cares, whatever. But now, in using that same kind of logic of assigning meaning, I choose the meaning of the things around me. And I think that the community that I'm part of is hugely important. And so when I can contribute meaningfully to that, then I feel good about myself, because I know that I'm helping and, you know, doing good things for good people. It's kind of like karma. The more good that you put out, the more good there is in the world. And it's just a generally kind of positive cycle. So one of the things that I thought was really interesting in terms of like positivity and the mind and how that can affect us is this page from Johns Hopkins Medicine. And so if we scroll down, it talks about the power of positive thinking. And so there was a scientist there, Lisa R. Yannick, and her findings say that positive people from general population were 13% less likely than their negative counterparts to have a heart attack or other coronary event. And so it's interesting that they kind of measured the people with positive and negative outlooks, and they essentially found that people who have positive outlooks are less likely to have heart attacks. So they talked a little bit about how you can boost your bright side, and they said like smile more. And it's interesting that even if you're fake smiling, I thought that was funny, even if you're fake smiling, it reduces the heart rate and blood pressure during stressful situations. So try a few minutes of YouTube humor. If you're having a bad time, that those things can kind of shift your mindset. And they say it's difficult not to smile when watching a favorite funny video. So I thought that was nice. And then it goes into talk about reframing and resiliency. And I think that reframing and resiliency are two things that are pretty closely connected. So what an example of reframing is, this kind of talks about rewiring your brain. So reframing is that you're in a bad situation. And the example that they use is a traffic jam. So for instance, they say, quote, appreciate the fact that you can afford a car and get to spend an extra few minutes listening to music or the news, and accepting that there is absolutely nothing that you can do about the traffic, unquote. And so that's a good practice, because instead of being angry about the situation that you're in, you know, take a moment and practice some gratitude. And being mindful of those things and practicing gratitude are two things that I think contribute hugely to well-being and building, you know, a better frame of mind, or like, and building a better outlook. They say that resiliency, quote, is the ability to adapt to stressful and or negative situations and losses, unquote. And so they even list 3 things here of ways that you can build resiliency. And I think that a lot of those things are connected to the reframing and the rewiring of your brain. So they say maintain good relationships with family and friends, because having support networks is really important. Like if you're feeling lonely, if you're feeling upset, having somebody that you can call is important. And if you don't have those connections, then making sure that you're utilizing resources like hotlines of people who are available, who do this for a living, who want to talk to you and want to make sure that you're okay. Creating those connections for support is really important. They say accept that change is a part of life, so things will pass. If something bad is happening, that's okay. It will eventually get better. And then the last thing is to take action on problems rather than just hoping they disappear or waiting for them to resolve themselves, because that is a huge contributor to chronic stress. Like if you have something at the back of your mind that you're constantly worried about, like those things are, you know, it would be concerns and potentially detrimental to your mental health. So happiness is a really important part of being well. And I think that like the fact that there's this study from Johns Hopkins that even suggests that is like a really good thing. Okay, so now that we've kind of looked a little bit at the background of what positive psychology and motivational psychology are, and like how those things relate to our mantras, I think it's really what we're going to spend a little bit of time doing is just looking at a bunch of different quotes and mantras that you can use within your collages that we're going to be doing. There's a bunch of articles online, and like I'll show you what things that I've kind of saved on my Instagram that I really love, and I'm going to be working with one of those. But we're just going to spend some time talking about, and I'm just going to tell you, and I'm going to quote a bunch of different things that you could possibly use for your own collages, for your own mantras to put in your spaces. This one as well, if you want to read, talks about what is a mantra, how does it benefit us, and these are ones that I thought were really nice as well. So I am grateful, I feel beautiful, I am beautiful. I think I would just use that section of it if I did that one. I am proud of myself, I am free to be myself. I have the power to create change. Like that's a big one that I really resonate with, because I think it's really important to kind of have those, to hold those beliefs that you do have an impact on the world around you. It's just a matter of recognizing what impact you're going to choose to have in a day. So these ones again are like a lot of I statements. So I treat myself with love and respect. I do not judge myself or others. I accept myself for who I am. And a lot of those things are really nice. And like one of the things that they talk about in this article is that, you know, declare your mantras powerfully. So if you're saying them out loud, whether it's in your mind or whether you're saying it verbally, believe when you say them and trust that with time your self-thoughts will no longer hurt you but instead will inspire you. So these are this kind of the idea with the cognitive behavior therapy of like kind of replacing and rewiring those pathways. So in the morning, if you have negative thoughts, to have something in your environment to look at in view of, like, say your bed. For me, I wanted to have one next to my computer because I spend a lot of time here. So to have those in sight so that you see them, it helps you kind of rewire those pathways and think better thoughts.